that moment, I had no idea that saving his life, I was going to save mine, because I know for a fact I would have been bit by a rattlesnake and alone and in the middle of nowhere if Jones wasn't there with me.
Hello, animal lovers. Welcome to Rescued by a Dog, the podcast about dogs who have actually saved their owners' lives. I'm Laura, author of the novel Not Just a Dog and host of this podcast. Our sponsor today is one of my favorite companies, Major Darling, which gives us ethically made gear and accessories that are worthy of our beloved dog children. To check out their gorgeous martingales, leashes, and other products, go to majordarling.com. While I work on stories for Season 4 of the podcast, I'm re-releasing some of my favorite stories from Season 1 so they can get more ears on them. Today, I'm sharing an incredible story from Maddie, whose dog Mr. Jones wrestled with a rattlesnake to save her life. You'll notice that the music is different and the editing isn't as tight, but I've left it mostly as it was when I first released it, just for the sake of nostalgia. A quick note about the story: when Maddie says APA, she's talking about the shelter Austin Pets Alive. All right, we're rolling.
Hello.
Hi, Maddie. How are you?
I'm very well.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Anytime.
Yeah.
This is a super fun opportunity.
It wasn't very hard to convince you to talk about your dog.
Oh, no, it never is. Never is.
I love that.
It's Jones literally tattooed on my body. He's
Awesome.
the talking point of my life.
So maybe first, let's just get you to tell the story of Mr. Jones.
Fantastic. So I had started looking for a dog. I was working as a equestrian center barn manager. So I worked outside, worked with my hands, just wanted a companion to be with me. And I visited APA's website a couple times, kind of saw him once or twice just with the bigger dogs. And it wasn't until I actually went to APA and he was in this, it's the Happy Tails kennel, because he had Happy Tail. He got so excited that he'd hurt his tail while in one of the smaller kennels. So he was all alone in this really bigger kennel.
That's a sad thing. If people don't know what Happy Tail is, it's like dogs want so much attention. They're in their kennels and they wag their tails so hard that it bangs against the side of the cement wall and it actually starts bleeding. And sometimes the bone is exposed. They wag so hard. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Actually, when I adopted him, he had a little purple, the tip of his tail was purple from hitting it. So I had just walked by his kennel and he was on a little, I guess he was on just one of the little beds, and he kind of perked up and came and said hi. And I texted my sister a picture of him and I said, "This is my dog." And
what did he look like?
He was about 70 pounds when I adopted him. He's just goofy looking, just white with some brown spots, one ear up, one ear down, beautiful underbite. It was just droopy lips. We always joked when I adopted him, they were like, "You have to do a breed, one of those DNA tests," because there was bets going because he was a favorite at APA. So surprisingly enough, I ended up doing it, and he was a purebred American Bulldog.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Why did you decide that he was your dog?
I don't know. There was just a pull. He was he was just mine.
I just had a feeling. Oh, I just got chills. That's so amazing.
He had a couple special needs. He had actually got returned. He got adopted once and returned. Didn't come from a great situation. And the people who returned him, he had some resource guarding. And so
Can you explain what that is for anyone who doesn't know?
So resource guarding would be, anything, for him, it would be anything that was comfort to him. He wanted to take territory over it. And if you wanted anything that had to do with that territory, he'd guard it, whether that was a growl or whether that was nipping. With him, it was never that. He just was super intimidating, and he was, at his full weight, he was 90 pounds.
Oh my gosh. And what did he guard? Like his bed? Or
So at the beginning, it was his bed or the couch. And there were lots of commands with him of, "Hey, you're not on the couch. You're not on the bed. This is your bed." So we started off very structured for him.
Were you nervous knowing you were taking a dog that could have had some behavior issues?
Oh,
you
yeah.
were.
I was living in an RV at the time, even though I was working outside 24/7, pretty much. Jones had that opportunity to be out, but with that resource guarding issues, I lived in a little tiny RV. And then I had an elderly cat at the same time. She was 15.
And how old was he?
He was about 6.
Okay.
He was estimated to be about 6, 7.
For a 90-pound dog, that's not young.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. And so they interacted really well. And the skills that he had come with were just crucial to what I was learning, because I was learning him. And
what kind of skills did he come with?
Oh, sit, stay. There were lots of recall with the property that I was over and the job that I had. I needed to have him have a strong recall. So whether he was on leash a lot of the time, he started going off leash a whole lot.
Around the horses?
Around the horses. He didn't mind them at all. I think they were just big, unique dogs, but because they were so much bigger than him, he had zero issue.
Do you know why he had an issue with dogs? Like, did he have some trauma in his past?
He had some trauma. So the home that he had come from, he had resource guarding issues within that, and there were other dogs around. An individual leaned down to get some food that the dogs were bickering about, and he ended up biting the human, the individual.
Accidentally.
And so I think he wasn't great with other dogs just because of that resource when it came into play.
And you never know with a rescue dog, too, if he had a scarcity of food when he was young, and so he ended up having to just fight for the food he needed with other dogs. Yeah. Sometimes it's that. Did you know his whole history? Did you ever find out his whole history?
No, I don't think I really did. I really didn't want Jones' past to have me judge who he was. I felt like he was mine, and no matter what, he was going to be mine, so I didn't have to know about the past.
Okay, that almost made me cry.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I'm surprised I'm not crying yet.
Yeah.
I probably will.
Okay, so let's talk about then the first moment you got him home.
Yeah.
What happened that moment?
So the first moment, I actually have a video of it. So I worked with horses, and I have this round pen, and it's all closed in, and I just put him in it because I didn't want him loose yet, and we had a lot of space, and I didn't want him interacting with the horses yet. So I put him in this round pen, and he just sprinted, just in circles and circles, and ran, and he just had this big smile on his face, and he just bumped into me, and he was just comical, I was, again, the barn manager, and so I had a lot of human interaction with the people who owned the horses on the property, and he was just an instant favorite. He was by my side. I worked outside. I cleaned stalls, worked horses, all sorts of stuff, and so he was by me 24/7 from the start. So when he hit my home, it was immediate. This is the routine. This is home, and so he just went straight into work dog mode and just... I vividly remember him sleeping about a week.
Yes.
Solid.
They often do. They're so stressed in shelter that when they get home, they crash. They're like, I'm finally safe.
Yeah.
He knew he was safe.
Oh, yeah. And he slept for a long time. And at that time, my house was very dog friendly, but my life was very dog friendly. The horse world is very, very dog friendly. So everywhere I went, he went to the feed store, to the barn, to horse shows, to everywhere. He was just by my side, know.
How was he when he would see other dogs in that context?
It was actually really, it's funny that you say that because before I even brought him home, I took him to a on-leash dog trail, with my sister. And she has 2 older dogs, Bruce and Logan. Bruce was a boxer mix and Logan was a big lab. And I thought those guys were big. They're about 40, 50 pounds. And then next to Jones, I was like, oh my gosh, I have a huge dog. So they actually, great on leash. They just met, and I met up with my sister, and we didn't make it a big deal. I just, hey, let's go on a walk. And so, there was distance between us, but he just found his little pack with Bruce and Logan. And from the moment they met to the entirety of Jones, he loved Bruce and Logan. Oh, cool. He no issue, no resource guarding. Yeah. He just knew that those were his brothers to a sense. I started seeing a little bit of that resource guarding behavior, and it intimidated me having such a big dog in a small space. So I think
So what was it the first time he showed it to you? What did he do?
He never liked his paws being touched, and I had just picked up his paw, and it was just this small growl, and there was no lunging, there was nothing, but it was he pulled it away and growled, and then kind of just scurried in. He had his kennel, he was fully kennel trained, and he just went further into his kennel like, I don't know you like that. And I think it was, one of the first 2 or 3 weeks that I owned him, and he was just a diva,
Yeah.
He had his own quirks.
But you know what we say? It's interesting you say that because all the trainers I know, we try to tell people growling is good.
Yeah.
Some people try and teach their dog not to growl, but the growl is what they do to tell you, I don't like that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how they avoid having to escalate into like barking or lunging or even biting, because if they growl and you stop, they're like, good, that was effective. So he did exactly what he was supposed to do.
And he was allowed to be comfortable. And I was like, okay, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that. But when a 90-pound dog that you don't really know growls at you, it was kind of very intimidating. And I grew up with a very small dog. Yeah. And I grew up riding horses and working horses. And horses are a prey animal. So I read them very differently than I do dogs. So it was, am I doing the right thing? And so there was lots of doubt within about the first couple weeks. I know at that time I was like, is this the right decision? Is this the lifestyle that he wants? Am I the right thing? Because there would be just some times that he didn't want to interact, or that, he kind of would get into his kennel and not want me around his kennel. And so it was like, well, is this the right choice for him? And because I have such expertise with horses, I know that there's a decompressing stage, and there's a time that it's usually with horses it's 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, that there's this time and this change. And so for Elvis is my horse, not my dog. For Mr. Jones, it was okay, at least let's get to the 6-week mark. Yep. Let's get to that point. Let's see what we do. Let's grow together. Let's see where we are. And it was really comical because as much as I loved him and knew that, like, I never felt so confident that was my dog. But, there's still that, am I doing the right thing? Is this okay for him?
Did you ever think of returning him?
I did. I played with the idea of possibly returning, but that wasn't something I wanted.
Your heart didn't feel good about it.
No. And so I was like, well, let's give it time.
Okay, so let's hear the story about how Mr. Jones saved your life.
Yeah, so again, I was house sitting for a friend of mine, and I was going towards a feed shed. It had been, I was house sitting that whole entire summer, so it was our normal routine. We would go every day. He'd jump in the truck. We'd head that way. He'd run around while I fed cows and horses. Nothing big. And he was my buddy. He was always at my hip.
And you had him how long?
We were at 6 weeks. We were at our 6-week mark. This was the make it or break it. We were getting really close, but we still had that. I was still intimidated by him. I'm pretty sure it was just me. He was so big, and so he was always by my side, and he wasn't allowed off leash yet. So he was by my side at that point. And again, I grew up riding horses. It was expertise. I worked outside for a living, and I was very aware of where I was and nature that's around us. But I made the mistake of stepping over a rattlesnake. Usually I'm very aware and sensitive to the environment that I'm coming into. The snakes of where I was, that's their environment. I have to be aware of it. And I didn't look, and it was just over this main pathway. And I took a step, and I heard a rattle, and in a flash, just bam, Jones was running, and he was yelping, and I looked over, and he had the snake in his mouth, and he was just doing this, just tugging it back and forth like you would with like a rope toy. And he was but not a toy. He was just out to, it needs to be dead. It needs to be done. And so try not to cry. So when he did that, he just kept on going farther away from me. The leash was dropped because, of course, I'd step over this rattlesnake. It was not really long. It was a smaller snake, but he grabbed it, and I kept on trying because he was just hugging it, and he had yelped once or twice, and I was like, Jones, drop it. Jones, drop it. And every time I took a step closer, he took a step farther away, and he was like, Mom, no, you need to stay there. And finally, he had dropped it and then just came running to me.
Oh, you're making me cry.
I know. And at that moment, I immediately grabbed him, and I had many interactions with horses and dogs with rattlesnakes. And I knew what the possibility was with Jones. And so I grabbed him, and he was panting, and he was stressed, and he looked at me, and I was like, let's get in the car. I made it an exciting thing. I was like, we're going to the vet. Let's get in the car. I need to look you over.
He was still able to walk?
Yeah, he was just his normal self. He had come running back to me, and I put him in the car, and I closed the door. I knew it was a rattlesnake. There was no doubt about it. It had rattled. I'd seen it, but I needed to confirm. I grew up around snakes, very respectful about snakes, but I needed to confirm that it was a rattlesnake. And it was. So I went over, and it was dead at that point. I mean, he completely obliterated it, and confirmed it was a rattlesnake. And I came back to him. And by that time, thankfully, being in the horse industry, I had vets on call. So I immediately called one of my close friends, Janet Rourke, and I called her. And I said, I don't know if my dog got bit by a rattlesnake, because I was on the phone with her just crying, panicked, and I couldn't find a bite. There was no swelling. There was no bleeding. I looked him over, and I noticed he had just little, like a blood drop on his neck. So it was where his shoulder and his neck met, a little higher up. And thankfully my vet said, hey, if worst comes to worst, I mean, your best step is if you feel like he got bit, take him to the vet. Take him to emergency vet, because she's on call, but she was like, that's where he needs to be. And then she gave me some advice of, if it's not, if there's this waiting period. And I said, I'll just go anyways. And that was the longest drive of my entire life. I was in the middle of, outside of Austin area, and the closest emergency vet was in Austin. And so it was about 30 minutes. Oh. And he was in the back seat, and he was panting, and he wanted the window down. Oh. But he was still kind of acting like his normal self. But while we were driving, he started itching like a hot spot, and he started making himself bleed. And so we got to the vet, immediately called them coming in. And I said, I think my dog got bit by a rattlesnake. I can't tell. There's not this crazy swelling. With horses, with dogs, the swelling is immediate. You triage as much as possible, and I just didn't see that in Jones. It was baffling. And so I took him to the vet, and we showed up. And by that time, he had a spot about the size of a silver dollar that he had rubbed raw. And so they took him back. And they had me in the waiting room. And that was the moment that I was like, I can't live without this dog. It was just that moment. It changed. Everything changed at that moment with him. And I knew he wasn't great with vets. He came actually with a medical history of an ear infection, chronic ear infections. So we had already gone to the vet, and he just didn't like it. So I knew how scared he was, how confused he was. And they took him back, and they did a blood draw, and they gave him, they took me back to a room, and he was in there with them for about 30, 45 minutes. And they came back and they said, so it's not in his bloodstream. Well, and they actually came and found me in the waiting room, and they're like, it's not in his bloodstream, but we're going to do a couple more things to make sure he's okay, because we just can't figure it out. And the best thing that we can see what happened was when I took the step and he reacted, the snake was actually striking and it was going to hit me. And he grabbed it in such a way and so fast that it was kind of mid-strike and it was behind the snake. So when it came up to strike, it didn't puncture him, but it kind of grazed his skin. So he had venom on his neck and he had caught his skin. It had tagged his skin, but it didn't fully puncture. So what I was seeing was just a reaction to the venom on his neck. So he had this black necrotic spot that stopped growing. We didn't leave the vet until it stopped growing. It took about 45 minutes. And we got home and we just existed together for the first time. Like, it was just us. And I was like, okay, now I'm stuck with you. and it was really funny because I always say that, I was looking into, the behavior issues were really scary and I was possibly going to return them. And it was his way to be like, I got you. You can't leave.
When you say you existed with him, did it feel different between you after that?
Oh, yeah.
How did it feel different?
I mean, he was a part of me. There was just, he gave so much in that moment. He didn't know me and I didn't know him. And just like you had said, we were just complete strangers and I was scared of him. And he gave me the chance to see that I shouldn't be. And that if that's what was going to happen in just 6 weeks of knowing him, what a lifetime together would be.
Oh my God, this is such an amazing story.
I know.
I'm bawling.
And that moment, I had no idea that saving his life, I was going to save mine because I know for a fact I would have been bit by a rattlesnake and alone and in the middle of nowhere if Jones wasn't there with me. And it was just, he was there with me. He protected me. He knew the steps. I'd never seen anything like that before, and I never will again. He was just...
Was he like that the whole time? First of all, is he still with us?
No, he's not. I lost him to cancer last year.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We don't have to talk about that because I'm sure that is something you probably can't even talk about still.
Yeah.
But was he... So how many years did you have him?
I had him 2 years.
And for those 2 years... Was that him? Like, did he show you who he was that day?
Oh, yeah. That was just purely Jones to the core of who he was. That was...
he was always just wanting to be there for you.
Oh, yeah. It was really funny. He was... he would be protective. He would... If there was a stranger coming by, he made sure that in a very friendly manner that he was between that individual. If we were walking on the road, he'd go from my left side to my right side to make sure that he was. But yeah, it was just he was my protector. He took that role without me wanting that or needing that. I mean, I did need that.
Yeah,
you
just didn't know it
exactly, and he was just. He sacrificed himself. I mean, he gave, and then everything throughout his entire life, how he lived, he just gave me everything that he could.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time.
So what was it like? Like, what was after that moment, what did your relationship feel like? Like, did he sleep in the bed with you? Did you trust him more? What happened between y'all that was different? Like, can you give me a moment that y'all would share together every day that was a highlight?
that was one thing that with his resource guarding, the adopted family who owned him before I did, the biggest resource guarding that they saw was on their bed. They let him sleep with them, and then they would try to get him off the bed, and it wasn't a great interaction. I can't speak for them, but they said that they returned him for that reason. So, when I adopted him for those first 6 weeks, he wasn't allowed on the bed. There was actually a baby gate that kept him from the bed. And that was mostly to respect my cat's space too. But it was also to be like, that's my space. You're not allowed there. And for the first 24 hours after he was out of the vet, we immediately we kind of, like I said, we existed. And I was like, all right, well, I guess let's go to sleep. Let's calm down. Let's kind of decompress and let's get you comfortable, which meant he was in my bed. It was instantly like, and he was so excited.
You didn't even think about it. You were like,
No.
Of course you're getting in my bed.
Yeah. And he was like, okay. And
He was psyched. He was like, oh my God.
yeah. And at that time, his neck did start swelling. I was watching it and I stayed up just about that entire night just watching him breathe. And he was just like, yeah, I'm in bed. Like, this is cool. Like, I'll do it again if this is what I get to do. And
he wasn't acting like, oh my God, I'm so grateful to be up here.
No, he was
just
like,
this is where I should have been.
Yeah. He was like, okay, if that's what I should have done, I would have done it earlier. Knowing him, I know that's his response.
Yeah.
He was like, mission accomplished. Like, I've achieved life. Like, I can't get any better than this. And from that day forward, I never went without him in the bed. He was just there. So it took him about another 6 weeks to fully recover. But it was really funny because I had shared it on Facebook. And somebody from APA shared his story with a local news TV news station. And they actually came out and did an interview with him.
Cool.
It was...
Did he like being on camera?
Oh, he loved it.
He did.
He loved it. They attached a GoPro to him, and he just ran back and forth. And I felt really bad because he was just so excited because it was at this point that he was feeling so much better. And I hadn't let him off leash until that recovery point. Until they had him on camera. And he was just running back and forth. And again, it was July. We tried to do it in the morning. It was humid. It was, 80 degrees. And he was just loving it because he was like, I get to run.
He was like, lady, I'm pent up.
Yeah.
You've been keeping me cooped up.
Exactly.
I'm about to take a run.
And so he was just going back and forth and just loved the attention on himself. And it was awesome to share his story and getting to hear from other people. And it made him the movie star that he was. I went through a whole career change and moved from living in the RV to an apartment. And he didn't bat an eye at it. He turned from an outdoor dog to an apartment dog.
Oh, wow.
And I was worried. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of scared that he's turning into this apartment dog. And nope, loved it, actually. I think he loved the more posh vibe.
Yeah, he was like, you should have got wall-to-wall carpeting a long time ago.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I specifically bought the couch for him because it was this tiny little area that I had for a couch, but it had a lounge area to it. And that was his. I have actually...
I really respect someone who buys furniture for a dog,
Oh,
I must say.
And it was his color. It was not like a white or a black. It was just this cream color because I knew he'd exist on this couch.
Yeah.
Which he did. And
that's next level. I've known people that bought furniture for a dog, but I've never known anyone who bought furniture for their dog and to match their dog.
Oh yeah. I'm a very clean person, and having a dog having a dog, you always have dog hair. I just didn't want to see the dog hair.
Yeah.
I wanted to know that it was there.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah. So that was where it came from.
Maybe people do this and I don't know it. Like you have a black dog, you get a black couch. Yeah.
Maybe. Again, my life was surrounded by Jones.
Yeah.
I just moved my whole life to accommodate.
Can you tell me one of your favorite days or moments with him during his life that had nothing to do with that incident? Just like a moment that you think back on when you think about your happiest times with him.
It's funny that you say that because one of my happiest times with him was just all the time.
Yeah. Oh.
And I say that now because I don't have it.
Yeah. It's not even like there were like certain days that were happy because every single day.
It was just existing.
God, that makes me want to cry.
Yeah. He was just, we existed together. He didn't, that was one thing that I, tried to tell everybody is just give him a chance. Just let him exist. Just take some time, and you might find a dog. Rescuing him might rescue you, So that was the perfect thing with Jones. I never knew that my life would be changed by him, and I know he's still with me forever. I won't have anybody else like him. So he's. I actually have his ears tattooed on me. He's with me, and it just feels right.